Hello, my name is Jann Haworth, and we're going to be working through a few drawing exercises today. But before we do that, I'm asked to introduce myself. I'm an artist. I was born in California. In fact, I was born in Hollywood, and I grew up there. I was there till about 19 years of age. I studied at UCLA. I studied art, and while I was growing up, I had the good fortune to be in a family of artists, and my mother was a ceramicist and a printmaker, and she, her whole life, earned her living through making art. My father was a production designer in Hollywood, and he worked on a lot of films. Over a 50-year career, he was working on things like Some Like It Hot and The Longest Day, and films like Sayonara with Marlon Brando and so forth. My dad didn't seem to know that you didn't necessarily take your children to work with you, and so he always took me to see the sets he was working on and the different movies that he was concerned with. We would go on missions to look for locations and things like that together. That gave me a pretty surreal childhood. And growing up, it meant that my normal was pretty abnormal. I would charge my dad with getting me a rock so I could jump off the rock and be Tarzan and things like that. Or he would come back to me and say, I'm doing a film called Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and we have to come up with a chrysalis or something like that to have these monsters sort of erupt out of, and how about we make something this weekend? I would say that, I sort of started in an unreal environment that was surrounded by artists and people who did work of a different sort. I never grew up having any idea that women were less capable than men, and I was well aware of the fact that whatever I decided to do, I would be able to do it. And I think that was California at the time, and probably is California how it is now too. And that meant that really, in my thinking, the world was a place you decided on something that you might like to make if you really wanted it badly enough. And so I, from a very young age, was making things. I brought along a little doll I made when I was 8. This is the first, I guess, 3-dimensional sculpture that I've ever made. And my mother taught me to sew when I was 7. And this doll kind of came out of learning how to sew and how to make a skirt and how to make a petticoat and things like that. My dad had brought me a little doll from Germany after the war, and it was a little boy doll, and so I wanted to make a little girl doll to go with the boy doll. I guess that's proto-feminism at work. Anyway, so that was part of my mission, and certainly the sculpture I did in the 60s was directly related to the fact that my mother and I made early clothes for myself, and then later on I was making all my own clothes as just part of what one did. California for me was eventually UCLA and the art department and art history. And then when I was 19, my dad said, would I like to come to France, because he was working on a film called The Longest Day, which is a recreation of World War II. I thought that was a good idea, and so I set sail on the Queen Elizabeth and arrived in Normandy and relived World War II. So I was on Utah Beach and Pointe du Hoc and Saint-Marc-Église, and so again, my introduction to Europe was pretty surreal from the point of view of the difference between I was in 1961 but living 1942, 43, 44 on the beaches of Normandy. Then I went to England directly after that on my way home, and 35 years later I was still in England. So I had a family in England. I went to the Slade School of Fine Art and studied there. Early in the 60s, London really was the place to be. It was a kind of explosion, a post-war explosion of cultural diversity. And I think it's important to note that London at that time in terms of creative activity, the creative activity was really across the board, from everything from fashion design, hair design, graphic design, magazines, all the way through to theater, film, photography, fine art, music. And often we think of the 60s as being the Beatles, the Beatles, the Beatles. Really, it was much more than that in London. And the pop art movement there really took off in probably 1958, 59. It wasn't called pop art then, it was called neo-dada, or sort of figurative art, kitchen sink art. Later it became known as pop art. And it was a movement that really had a wide way of speaking to the whole culture. It was really coined from the idea of popular art, in other words, art of the people. And that meant that we were looking at things like circus art or film or popular entertainment. And so early on, the pop art movement was both in New York and in London. London had specific kind of qualities to the art that arose from the teaching that young people received in the art schools. And I was very fortunate to go to the Slade. There were a lot of wonderful painters, wonderful tutors there that really grounded you in learning to draw, which is our subject today, but also learning to paint, learning to stretch your canvas. So the people that were there had a background in the very traditional production of art, and all of us really benefited from that. As the movement developed, it became wider and wider, the kind of, let's say, the difference, the disparity between New York pop and British pop, to my mind. And I think the development was very interesting because there was such a fervent culture in London at that time. And certainly the Beatles were a part of that. They were a product of it. They were not the cause. The cause is earlier than the Beatles turned up on the scene. For one of my credits that I guess is most often cited, I was the co-designer of the Sgt. Pepper cover, which was done in 1967, and a couple of my sculptures are on that cover. On the right-hand side, you'll see an old lady with Shirley Temple on her lap, and those are both my sculptures. And besides that, I was involved in, obviously, in the design and the production of that cover. And that's kind of followed me through my career in certain ways, not as something that, I cringe about, but something that makes me every so often look at again and reevaluate. So many years later, in 2004, I felt it was, time to look at that again, because I read in Rolling Stone that of the album covers of all time, they dubbed Sgt. Pepper the #1 album of all time. I'm not sure that's true, but that's what they said. And I thought maybe it was time to look at that again and ask a few questions about the validity of that statement. And it disturbed me to discover that there were only 12 women on the cover, and that ethnic diversity was a bit iffish, and that really the cover itself reflected more celebrity perhaps than interested me at the time. So it's 1997, and I'm coming to the end of 35 years in the UK. I heard a quote when I was driving in Bristol, and it was Robert Hughes on the radio, and he said that an artist, in order to renew herself, needs to return to the wilderness. And it just so happened that that was what I was about to do, and it meant a lot to me, that sentence. I went in 1997 to work at Sundance Resort and set up something called the Art Shack, and the Hot Glass Works there, and we also set up one of the first 6 charter schools in Utah. It was a really, really interesting period of time that I was brought back into the film industry again, but through the independent film industry at close quarters to the film labs in Sundance. So it was a very stimulating environment to have an art shack, be teaching drawing, be teaching printmaking, and all sorts of things. Out of that came a children's festival, and during the children's festival I did a couple of residencies in schools and developed a process that is the process I'm going to work with you today on. Besides that, it came up in 2004, actually it was 2003, that the Rolling Stone decided that they would nominate the 100 best albums of all time, and they chose Sgt. Pepper as #1. And being the kind of cynical person I am on some levels, I thought I really should look at that cover again and do an analysis of what was the content. And I found, to my horror, there were only 12 women on the cover. Half of those were fictional. All of the women, I have to say, and apologize for the fact that it was Peter Blake and myself that decided those women. The Beatles chose no women to be on the Sgt. Pepper cover whatsoever. And the idea behind the cover was that they chose their heroes. They didn't really. They only chose about a third of the people who appear on that cover, and Peter and I chose most of the rest of them. So thinking about what Rolling Stone was suggesting was that the music was great. The cover, I was beginning to think, wasn't so great, and maybe it was a time that maybe we should do another analysis of that. And to that end, I began to talk to friends and my family to say, why don't we do a mural in Salt Lake City that really perhaps corrects the original Sgt. Pepper. And in that mural, we'll have 50% women, and we will have people that aren't just celebrities, but perhaps people of different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different walks of life, people who are catalysts for change. Well, that kind of launched a bunch of things, because from that, we did that mural in 2004. And then later, we did another mural that has been to a lot of venues in the last few years. In 2016, we began a mural called Work in Progress. And Work in Progress is really to tell people their history, but it's the history of women's work, and that means that that mural is about contributions to culture that women have made. And it arose out of a comic strip that I did, where I was going to just create one little frame that was of women who were well, interesting. They wrote, they did, important things in a historical sense. And when I was doing that little frame with just a few heads of women in the frame, I realized how little I knew. And I really thought, well, maybe it was time that I did something that really paid homage to what women have contributed to society. Because if I didn't know it, I didn't think anybody else knew it or well enough. So we began a mural called Work in Progress. This is, I should cut back to SLC Pepper and Work in Progress and subsequent murals that we did. They're community projects. That means the community picks the people who are on the mural, and also the community makes them. And that means that you're working with people who may have no experience in art whatsoever. And that's what we're going to be doing today too. And so the idea here is that you ask someone in the community to make a portrait of somebody. That's difficult, but there are ways of doing it that make it really easy. So the community choice on Work in Progress was very much about the women who were making developments in medicine or in art or in public service or in nursing or in discoveries or inventions or mathematics or astrophysics. And the idea there was really to cite these women so that it was like a learning curve for people and a surprise that there were so many people. I have an example here of one of the panels. This panel was done at BYU with students and professors, many of whom had never done a portrait ever before. And you can see how the different styles are emerging here and how proficient they are. These are all very distinctive, recognizable, different views of different individuals, and a styling has developed even in this first stage of actually making a portrait. And you'll find that in your own work too, if you sort of proceed through the workshop that we're going to do today. The last mural to mention is a mural that we've most recently done, and it too is based on the Sgt. Pepper crowd idea. This is a mural that we did in 2020. Half of the mural was done under pandemic conditions, which you may believe is a challenge. And we worked on that for a year. Alex Johnston, my son, and myself, and my daughters were involved, and well, most all the family was dragooned into working on this mural. There are 300 portraits. 90% of the portraits are done by people who have no art experience whatsoever, and it's a pretty amazing mural, not just because of the pandemic, but because of the sheer size of it. It's 6,000 square feet, and that's about a tenth of a football field. It's a very big mural on a 7-story building in Salt Lake. It was commissioned by Zions Bank, and we're all very proud of it. So without further ado, I think we'll go into the studio next door, and the light is a bit brighter there, and we'll be working on the first of these exercises that will take you through the drawing process. It's a little different than the mural making process, which was stencil graffiti. This will be actually drawing, and there'll be some very simple exercises at the beginning, and drawing isn't a mystery. It doesn't have to be a talent-based thing. Most people can draw. In fact, most people do draw. Anytime you make a letter A, or you lift a pencil up to make a shopping list, you're actually drawing words. You're changing directions the whole time that you're writing the lettering, so it's not as mysterious a process as it has given people to believe. We'll be going through a series of exercises that take you step by step, piece by piece, through little tasks, and the whole sum of those little tasks will end up being a drawing. And it allows you to do something that you pick up in 5 minutes or an hour. You can work for a short period of time or a long period of time on it, just depending on what other things that you have to do in your life. And so the idea is that you have a task at hand that is not too difficult, not too time-consuming, and that you can do slowly, that you can take a break from whatever it is that you've been working on and change your focus. And why that's important is that I think most of the things that we do today we're asked to do quickly, efficiently, accurately. With drawing, it's much more about you and what you see in a drawing, and it's much more to do with being slow and being contemplative and developing your own way of looking at something and getting to know something. And that's the important bit we'll be talking about in a minute. So without further ado, we'll go next door. What you see in front of you here are drawings by different people. Some of them are more expressive than others. Some of them are absolutely spot on accurate, being as carefully representational of the thing that they're drawing as they possibly can. So these are some autobiographical drawings that I've done. I wanted to make little kind of doll-like figures whose bodies were composed of things that meant things to me when I was little. So they're really accurate drawings of Raggedy Ann's foot, or a doll that I had that I pulled all the fur out of, or comic strips that I really liked, or this is a figure that was in McCall's magazine called The Watchbird is Watching You, and thanks to the internet I could look that up and find an accurate representation of it and do a drawing of it. So this is a pencil and paper, that's all it is. And I think one of the things that is good about drawing is that you can take it anywhere, you can buy the materials very cheaply, and it doesn't have to be a huge investment of money or a huge investment of carting stuff around if you want to go and draw a tree somewhere or some flowers. This drawing here is done by one of the students that I taught, Chris, and Chris must be about 20 years old now, because this is a drawing that he did a long, long time ago. But this is from a photograph by a man called Fazal Sheikh, who does photographs internationally, but principally in Afghanistan. This is an Afghani child, and Chris was in the 4th grade when he did this drawing. We did about 100 drawings with children in this particular zone when this method that I'm going to work with you on was first done. And it's really accurate, and it's very gratifying because as the image appears, this is another 4th grader, and this is one of many. This isn't just, the special ones or the ones that are, we might say, are the most accurate. These are all the kids that worked on this project did work to this standard. The other one I wanted to show you is a more expressive drawing by my friend Howard Bruff. Howard is an artist who makes up things, and this is pencil work too. So when you've been doing some of the exercises that we are doing today, and you need a break, do give yourself a break of just making something up out of your brain, just maybe a large doodle, just to kind of exercise that part of your creative input. And Howard's is a good example of that, of trying to think about pattern and think about different stylings and different darks and lights and small and large. And that gives you kind of another view of what drawing can be. And then, oops, that's not sticking up there. Let's put that down. Then this is a 2nd grader using this method. And it shows you that a drawing can be both fairly accurate and fairly expressive. And I like that. It's not that everything has to be perfect. You don't have to have it absolutely exactly right. It can have some of the sort of style changes and still be a really interesting work of art. So let's have a look at the drawing now. We're going to talk about drawing now. I'd like to ask you the question, why draw? Why would anyone want to draw? What is it for? Does it make a difference? Is it important? And I think it really is. And I'll tell you some of the reasons for that now. Drawing is actually getting to know something slowly. It's really looking at something, and it becomes like a friend or something that you have inside you in a special sort of way. You're slowly getting to know the turn of a flower's petal, or really looking intently at how a feather is constructed. And that experience is just not like anything else. You are almost fused with it. It's like sympathetic magic. It's no accident that one of the first skill sets that we are aware of in culture happened 35 to 37,000 years ago in the Lascaux caves, of people drawing on the wall. They couldn't write. They probably had a fairly developed language. They were hunters, and drawing was a way of knowing. It was a way of understanding. And it's something that we've put to one side, saying that only artists do this at this point. And it's not true. All children come to school singing, dancing, making up plays, drawing, doing all those things, and they leave doing none of those things. And that is marginalizing something that are core skill sets that have been with us since we could call ourselves human beings. And that is one of the ways that we actually define a human being, is, did they make tools? Did they invent things? Did they draw? Did they have culture? Did they decorate pottery? So I think it's core. And I think that our society benefits from having skill sets that are diversified and interesting and engaging. And most of all, in our society today, things that slow you down, that aren't accomplished as fast as you possibly can do it. Making a sauce for a spaghetti, and you dump it out of a jar. It's better to stand there and fry the onions and be thinking about things and slowly make a sauce. It's a more engaging, personal, inspiring process. Well, drawing is in that category, and it is easy. The thing that I actually hear more than anything else from people who are in a drawing class is, oh, well, I can't draw a straight line without a ruler. Well, artists use rulers too when they want to draw a really straight line. Or I only draw stick figures. Well, artists do that too. When they're just sketching in something, they'll draw a stick figure before they put the flesh and the muscles and so forth. They'll just put it in really simply in a stick figure form. So there's nothing to apologize for there. That's a good basic skill set, a ruler, a straight edge, stick figures. And then the third thing that I hear is someone will have a memory, a very young memory of doing a drawing of a volcano, and theirs was the only one that wasn't put up on the wall. And I would suggest to you that one of the things that makes that a very telling experience that people remember all their lives is because drawing is emotional. And if you attack an emotion and say, your volcano isn't as good as everybody else's, it hurts you. It's like if I said, stand on a table and sing a song to 100 people, you'd probably be really embarrassed. We're very vulnerable in the arts because they express something that's very emotional and personal. And I think that's an important thing to acknowledge. And I would say that then it is a gateway to some of the things that we need in our society, especially when we're stressed, especially when we have too many things going on in our lives, when we're unhappy, when we're uncertain. It's also something to celebrate when we have a new member of our family or something that's magical happening in our lives, that art also is a vehicle for expressing that happiness and that joy. So let's enter this process really with lots of those things in mind. And let me tell you something about the simplicity of the tools that you need. And you can invent your own sort of alternatives to these, just depending on what you have available. You don't need anything expensive to draw. All you need is a pencil. I happen to like pencils that are very dark, that are, we call them 4B or 3B, but that's just me. Some people like other pencils that are quite hard. This is just an ordinary 2B pencil. You can draw with that. This was a gift. I don't even know what it is. So an art store can give you some guidelines on what kind of pencil might suit you. I would say start out with a 3B because you can get really dark tones with that and really light. I think this is your best friend, an eraser. You can see mine is very much used. It's a white eraser, and they seem to tackle the pencil better than, say, the eraser that's on the top end of a pencil. This tends to leave a kind of funny smudge. So I'd invest in a white eraser. You can cut it up, too, and you can cut it into points if you need to kind of erase something that's very small. I made a nice discovery not so long ago of a pencil that is an eraser, which means you can sharpen it. That you can get at most art stores. It's kind of a friend of mine now. I really like using that, but it's not essential. And for our purposes, we're going to be poking holes in the original thing that we're working on a little bit later in these exercises. So I like to have a kebab stick that you have to be careful with because you don't want to poke your finger, but that's a kind of useful tool. Scissors. We're going to need those scissors. They're very important. And sharpeners. Sharpeners wear out, so you have to renew these. The blades get really dull and you can't sharpen your pencil. If you're one of those people who likes to sharpen a pencil with a knife, that's kind of fun. Takes a kind of moment. You can look at your drawing while you're sharpening your pencil, and then you can finally sharpen it by stroking it on sandpaper. This is to fix your drawing to the paper below. You'll see why that's necessary in a minute. And we don't have to get fancy with paper. You can just use the kind of paper that you print on, or you'll see later that we're going to be drawing on recycled bags. Great way to recycle. And this gives you paper that is a kind of brown mid-tone. Working on mid-tone papers is a dream, and I'll explain that later. But save your paper bags and use them as art materials. You don't have to spend any money buying expensive, fancy rag paper when you've got a whole pile full of paper all set from your shopping bags. So I think I've covered all the points that I need to cover as far as introduction, and we'll move now to the actual exercise, the first exercise of several now. Okay, so this is the first exercise we're going to do, and it's very much similar to the ones that I've done in schools, done with adults, done with children, done with my students. It's a very supportive thing, and you can do this. It might feel scary and odd at first, but once you get into it, it'll start to roll. I would like to say at the beginning of it that I will show you lots of little cheats. And the cheats are things to support you. Bear in mind, as if you take this up and do more drawing, you'll want to remove the cheats. It's like if you have an operation and you have crutches, your goal is to get rid of the crutches and to walk without them. So stretch yourself. Don't completely depend on these. Every so often, make it uncomfortable. You will do better in discomfort because it will wake you up again and make you pay attention to what you're doing. Don't be afraid of it. You'll find yourself thinking, how do I do this? Is it going to be right? We're so concerned with being right all the time. It doesn't matter if you make a mistake. You can erase it, or you can look at it on the wall a day later and say, wow, that line is so wobbly. I'm just going to correct that. That's what artists do. They look at their work, and 9 times out of 10 they're furious with it because it's not the way they wanted it to be. They'll correct a line, they'll make a place darker or whatever. So don't be afraid of being uncomfortable, and do use the cheats and do take them away. All right, the first and only trick you need to know about this is what I'm going to do is cut away a bit of the drawing here that's a photocopy just on ordinary printing paper, and now it's not there, and it's my job to fill in on the piece of paper that's taped to the back that I haven't cut. This, I have my model, it's sitting right there. I can look at that. I can put it back in and say, oh, okay, all these are kind of lining up. Let's see, I think I go on, how long do I go on with that line? Okay, I'm making my internal processes, what's going on in my head, which will be some of the processes that you will go through. I'm saying them out loud for you. Perpendicular, horizontal. How long does it go on for? This line tells me that I'm at this angle going down. I can see this angle is the same as that is the same as that. So I'm going to copy that. It doesn't matter if it's a little bit off because maybe it was like that in the first place. But now I have the beginning of that. So you see that now it's filled back in. And the kind of object here is to turn you into a photocopier. I don't really want you to be a photocopier in the end, but if you develop this eye, hand, mind coordination, you'll be able to draw what you see. And it may be a flower, it may be a bird, it may be a face, but your eye will be coordinated with your hand, and that's what drawing is. Okay, so let's take another chunk off. I'm going to go up like this. I'm going to take a bigger chunk this time. You may want to take smaller chunks. You may also want to have a support here, and I'm going to show you a cheat. I'm going to hold that in place, and I'm going to poke a hole on a key point, which is the point of that point of feather, or whatever it is, right there. And I'm going to peek and make sure it's there. Oh, okay, it's there. Now I know that that's what I'm aiming for. It gives me a bit of support to say, that's as far out as this wing comes, and this is as high up as it is. So now I'll fill that in. I'll take that. I know it's a horizontal line. I identify that. Horizontal. I know that it is the same as these other angle lines. How long does that go on? What is the duration of that line? I'm going to call it a 1/2 inch. And then I'm going to take that back to here. How far does it come back? Well, I know I've cut it there, and it's supposed to perpendicularly touch that piece of paper. So I'm making up new statements all the time, saying, where do I go from here? How do I do this? I know that point shows on this piece that I've just taken off. So I have to make this line a little longer to agree with that. I'm just doing horizontals and verticals and probably 45-degree angles here. So I can kind of talk about that to myself. I also can say, all right, coming in here, where do I go up and down on that? I have to join to that line and go up and down. Now we have another bit that's in there. It might be slightly off, it might be slightly on, doesn't really matter. It's pretty accurate. It's as accurate as I need it to be. Okay, so I will just proceed with this, and as something occurs to me to talk to you about, I will talk to you about it. I think I'll make another hole here to support the point at which I stop that. I might make a hole down here to say, hey, this is all the further this comes down there. I might challenge myself and say, no, I'm not going to put those holes there. I'm just going to see if I can do it. If you've had some drawing experience, you might want to push the envelope a little more. Okay, I'm going to go right to the left of that hole I made, because now I know where that is. I can do my drawings according to that. So I know that I continue this line to that point. I know that I want to be completely horizontal, going across here, joining to that loose feather that sticks up there. I know that I'm really on the point of this, so I can come parallel there. Use geometric words, use parallel, use perpendicular. Horizontal and perpendicular are pretty comfortable for us. We live in a horizontal perpendicular world. Our housing, our places of business and so forth are set out on perpendicular horizontal patterns. So we're pretty familiar with that. We feel pretty comfortable with that. So there we are, a little bit more established. And so we would just go on like that. I think I'm going to be mean to myself and see if I can do that zigzag staircase there. Let's see how well we do with that. If we end up over here comfortably, then I'm going to be happy. Again, it's a matter of duration. How long do I go on with something? I know this is horizontal. I know this is vertical. I'm just doing sketchy lines there, which I don't really like. I'm going to have to tell myself that. Horizontal and up and horizontal. Whoops, I'm not coming out at the right place. Well, sort of the right place. I did have a little nick up there. Well, maybe that's not too bad. There. There's another trick for drawing that's kind of nice. If you have somebody around you, they can become your drawing teacher, even though they have no experience. Because what you say is, okay, friend, could you spot the difference here? Where have I goofed up? Where is it not right? Is that too low? No, we had that point there. Spot the difference. Well, there wasn't that overhang, so let's get rid of that. That doesn't look very good. How come you did so many lines instead of one clean line? Well, I don't mind that. It's kind of arty. We'll leave that. Is that all right? Well, yeah, but why is that not kind of lining up? The spot the difference is a game that we're all really good at. And that's what artists do when they're looking at a face or at something. They're trying to find what's different. I'm going to teach you something now that is perhaps one of the most important things that occurred to me. And I suddenly thought, that's the way to do it. That's the way to talk about it. Here's a clock face. We are all familiar with the clock face. We know that 12 is at the top, 6 is at the bottom. We know 3 is here, and we know 9 is there. One of the things that troubled me when I was first learning to draw really accurately was, what is the angle of that line? I was pretty confident, as I've said, about horizontal and vertical, but Yeah, 45 degrees, that was kind of could do that. Not so good on 60, 30. And what I'm talking about here is, what is this angle? What is that angle? What is this angle? It's not vertical. It's kind of just off vertical. But if you think about it as the hour hand on a clock, if my line is vertical, it's either 12 o'clock or 6 o'clock. If it's horizontal, it's either 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock. If it's a sort of angle, we're not quite sure what it is. Is it 2 o'clock or is it 2:30? Is it right in between? 45-degree angle is really kind of 2:30. What about this angle here? If the hour hand was pointing there, you would know that it was something after 6, maybe 6:15. You can get really accurate with that. If you say, that's an 11 o'clock line, or is that a 10:30? If you think through the clock, you can get pretty accurate, even with things as complicated as the butterfly down below, that the angles are like clock directions. And even when a line bends like the butterfly below, we start out at 1 o'clock, we begin to bend towards 2 o'clock, we bend definitely 2 o'clock, and then we're going maybe to 2:30, and now we're almost at 3. So thinking through the clock or any other invention that you make actually will take you to some pretty good drawing skills in your own head. I once taught somebody who was all over the place with the drawing, and I was going around the class, and I came back to him after having taught this part of this, and some 10, 15 minutes later, and his drawing got so accurate, and it wasn't because of the clock. I said, "Oh, what are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I'm a navigator. I'm using my compass." And he was to tiny slivers of angles he was familiar with insofar as charting his course during the drawing. Okay, I'm going to go through here and do a couple of these lines. There, continue that up to that, and take this curve through and meet that guy. Now let's do something more difficult. I'm going to show you, when you get pretty good at this, what you might want to try to do. Cut the drawing right in half, right down the middle, and then you may want to draw the whole half of that, using this as your guideline more than, say, just taking little snips. Okay, I've jumped forward. I would suggest that you just do little snips all the way through, but I'm jumping forward because I want to keep this moving. So here we go up there. Here I know I do a mirror version of this. I'm going to go at that angle and then take it up to about here. A little bit less of a curve angle there. And I'm looking at my model to the left and trying to copy that as best I can. Do you see how I'm closer to 3 o'clock than I should be? I should be closer to 4 o'clock going down there. And then turn that corner. All right, now the whole face of the bird is gone, and I haven't got a symmetrical thing there. So I've overstepped the margin here a little bit. Up. And then let's see. Here's another thing that you might be interested in. This is what we call a negative space. It's the surrounding area around the thing that we're actually drawing. Negative spaces are really interesting. If you can turn them into something, if you can imagine what is the shape of this negative space and draw that rather than thinking beak, bird, or whatever, this negative space to me is the shape of a kite. It's a lopsided kite, so I have to remember that. Or we could say it was the shape of an arrowhead. If you turn it into another something, sometimes it's easier to draw. Okay, let's draw this slightly lopsided arrowhead. or kite. Bird beak comes there. Okay, I'm thinking that's reasonably accurate. Okay, and then I'm going to have to, I think I'll do a nice little cheat here just to make sure we're still in the right place. Oh, that's doing something funny. Okay, I'm going to put a hole there so that we know where that beak comes. Chunk. All right. And curve down beak. And remember what that looks like. Curve back, head, and finish the circle. It has a cross in the middle. Okay, so we've done half that drawing, and the repeat of that would be fairly easy. I mean, I could go about this saying, okay, I'm just going to put a couple little guideline things there, and maybe I'm going to take the leap and take the whole thing away. Maybe not. Maybe I would just take little bits of it away as I did the first time. You could rehearse that. We could put a dot on every key point and use a crutch like that, remembering that, hey, we're going to do away with our crutches when we can. All right, let's do that. Let's take the whole half away. I don't recommend that you take the whole half away. I'm doing this because I want to speed up the filming. I would say that you do it really, 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 really slowly, you know, when you do your first drawing. Okay, I'm going to use the drawing that exists as a copy. I'm going to take this off so I can see it, and I'm going to leap in this end. So this would be, what I would say is this is lesson 2 for you after you've proceeded really slowly doing this, using points and things like that all the way through. The other thing, I always work the wrong way around. If you're right-handed, you should start on the left-hand side and work to the right-hand side so you don't smudge your drawing. But for some reason, I find that very uncomfortable. If you're left-handed, the reverse. You should start on the right side. The reason for that is you don't want to smudge your drawing. But I would do this and cover up the drawing if I was worried about smudging, which in this case I'm not too worried, but I may have some erasing work to do. So I'm going to put some guide points because I'm taking such a big chunk. I want you to feel secure when you start diving away from the actual taking little steps. So this would be lesson 2. This would be the second time you do this, not the first time. This is just to give you the next lesson, basically. Okay, so we're going to use those guide points. I'm using this. I'm drawing from it. You've seen artists look at something and copy it. We're going to finish the side of that. Okay, here's another tip. If I got these little black bits wrong, as it were, that they weren't perfectly accurate, it wouldn't really matter. The design might have been like that. As long as we put them in fairly confidently, we can say, well, you know, that's sort of how that was. Okay, so let's get from here to there. And where is this? This is too long. I don't want to go down that far. And we're going to be coming 45-degree angle there for the bird's wing. Let's just double check that we're kind of okay there. That's to that point. The next point is the point of the feather, so we have to go up to that point and then back. And then the next point that I've made a hole here, I can see the point there, and we know that's horizontal, so we'll come back. I'm working at an odd angle here. Okay, some things to tidy up there a little bit. We talked about this before. This is a 45-degree angle. How long is that line? Let's call it 1/2 inch. And then it's going to come in a little bit. You can line things up here that how far it comes in is somewhere in relation to that point that we know is for sure because we marked it. It's to the right of that. So if this is accurate, then I do want to come even a little further in there. probably there. And I didn't mark that point, so that's something I'll have to estimate. Slowly. And your line will improve and become more steady if you do work slowly. Do you see that here, this is not lined up with this, so there's a little step there. Anything that you do in your head verbally does support your drawing. And there's two ways of looking at this. Some people think that you should silence the words in your head. I don't work that way. Some people work really not talking to themselves while they're drawing. My daughter does. And I work like a tennis game between, ooh, that looks awful, change it. What is wrong with it? Is it to the right? Is it to the left? Is it a big gap? Is it a little gap? What is that negative space? I talk in my head when I'm drawing. That may not be your process. You can work in whatever way is comfortable to you as far as the dialogue in your head or complete enjoyable silence in your head. This drawing is not about art as such. It's about exactly reproducing something that's there as exactly as one can. And as a warm-up exercise, it fills the bill because it takes you into what your hands do, what your mind does, how you assess something, the questions. Is it a great work of art? Of course not. It's just an exercise to sort of say, okay, yeah, I was kind of accurate, but this still bugs me. That doesn't look right. I would redo that 12 times before I'd be satisfied with it. And something that I also could pick up and put down, something that I could put color and tone into. I could also say, oh, where are the mistakes? Spot the difference. Here's a spot the difference moment. Those aren't lining up. Where's the spot the difference? Is that as far down as it should be? What's going on there? Are those angles right? Where is the little infill shape there? Do I want now to have a moment where I've done all this kind of setting it out? What about making it then into a pattern? Doing some stuff that I just make up stuff now. Have a little break from accuracy and go over to pattern or infill. What would that look like? Would that just be a nice, relaxing thing to do? Okay, so that exercise, done as well as it can be done under the circumstances, is a first stopping point. And so we'll take a break there, and we're going to move on to another exercise now. Okay, all right, we're going to do exercise 2 here, and I will skate through this pretty fast. It is another drawing that is based on symmetry, but we're going to handle it a little differently, and you might have fun with this one even as the first exercise if it appeals to you. You could take a look online and look for some black and white reproductions of butterflies. Print them out, and then once you've printed them, you put them on a piece of paper, which you tape underneath, and then what you're going to do is cut this symmetrical image in half. I didn't want to run into any copyright stuff, so I just did a quick little drawing of a butterfly, and we'll take photographs of all this, so this is available to you. Okay, I'm inclined to draw the right-hand side of things because I'm right-handed. Some of you may prefer to start on this side if you're left-handed, but for some reason I always want to start on this side. The idea here is twofold. If you are not really wanting to go down the accuracy line, what you might want to do is to make up a crazy second half that has nothing to do with this first half, but it is the other wing of a butterfly. That's a really nice exercise because it means you're going to be inventive and do sort of anything you want. It might be nice to have the outline of this so that it actually looks like a butterfly that could fly, but the infill could be just a made up something or other. We can use some of the things we talked about in the first exercise. We could punch a hole to say this is how far out the point is, the high point of that wing there. We could punch a hole here and say this is where the two wings come to a point. We could punch another hole here and say this is how far down the swallowtail comes. We also, when we're doing it, we might look at it and say that we're doing a mirror image of something and that we want to be very accurate about that. And in that case, we can look at this idea of negative space. Negative space is the space that's around, as we've talked about, the object, and it has a shape, and you can name that shape if you like, to say, it's sort of parallel, or it sort of isn't parallel, or that's a sort of iron shape, or a peninsula, or if you name it, you can draw it a little more easily. So here, I'm going to be trying to do as accurate a version as possible, but that may not be what you feel like right now, and you can do it differently. Now I'm going to try to make the second antenna like the first, and I'm thickening up the line here because I drew this with a Bic pen, and I want it to be looking as like the Bic pen as possible, so I'm making a kind of thick line. And down we come, and then we're going to go up from here, up and up and up, and I'm already seeing that I'm wrong, but it's going to stay there for a minute. Come down, 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 a little more curvy there, and there, and I'm going to rehearse that line a little bit more so that it looks more like the Bic pen. I know that the point was right on the point there, and then it turns and it comes down. And here is a good analysis point. Is that line there perfectly vertical? And it's not. It isn't even 7 o'clock though, is it? It's sort of 6:30. So I'm going to take this angle in a little bit at 6:30 and come down, and know that I have to make a turn pretty soon to get the curve to come down to that point that I've established. All right. That is giving me kind of an accurate take on this. I'm now going to go to the body and go up and do the mirror image of this as best I can. And we're going to have that line there to establish the top. And I can see where I'm going there. I'm not going to labor the point here and do all of this because I want to get on to the main drawing that we're going to do, which is kind of harder, and get that laid in for you. So just going to do the basic, this part of it. Now here's the point where you can either say, well, you're going to get creative, or you're going to double check yourself. You can hold up your work to a window, which I'm going to do right now. Place this in position and see how accurate you were. If you hold it up, whoopsie, let's get it up there right. Okay, I'm not too far off, so I can double check my work and say, okay, I have a tendency to do this. Either I have a tendency to make things too big, I have a tendency to be a bit frightened and make them too small. I have a tendency not to see a slight angle. I kind of made it like it's vertical and it really isn't. So you become your own teacher that way, and it gives you a double check if you're working on fairly thin papers like this. Okay, without laboring the point, I think you can see where this is going. This is a symmetry drawing. We're able to look at this as a model. We're able to look at this as a model. We can look at the negative space here and see if we think that's accurate. Well, look, this is a bit thinner than I have it here, so I could correct that. We can ask our friend to say, spot the difference for me. Where are you seeing differences? Whoops, there's some differences there. So you can have, you don't need a teacher right near you. You need to look at it a half an hour later and see it and see the, the slight deviations in it. Or you can say, oh, I'm really tired of all that. I'm going to be doing an abstract expressionist other wing in here. I'm going to start with little circles, and I'm going to go out from that, and I'm going to make a daisy in that wing. I just need a rest here. I need a doodle space. Doodle is drawing. It's not a lesser form of drawing. It's what you do when you're on the telephone sometimes. This is also something that you can do when you're doing something else, and that's something I think is really valuable, that if someone you're with wants to watch a television program that you're not particularly keen on, you can take out your sketchbook or your drawing pad and you can do something like this while you're listening to the program, or while you're waiting for something to cook, or other activities. If you have it nearby, it's a really easy thing to pick up and put down and just do a little bit at a time. In fact, the drawing actually benefits from that, because you probably are on high focus when you first start to work like that, and you pay attention to what you're actually doing. Okay, let's wrap that up just now, and I'm going to show you another couple of examples of things that you might like to get online and then print out and have a go at. I'm going to demo just quickly another thing that you can do. You can go online and you can look for different kinds of drawings that interest you. I've chosen to do one that's by Leonardo da Vinci. Artists get very interested in drawing eyes. After all, it's the eye that is actually making doing the work of a drawing too. And so this eye appealed to me. It has a lot of cross-hatching going across it, but for the purposes of my showing a demo for you, I just concentrated on these lines. They're nice and thick, which means that if you put them down kind of in the wrong place, first of all, you can thicken them up in the direction that they should be. And so taking this drawing, I would have approached this in the same way, just cut a piece in and try to bridge the missing bits. So one thing to be aware of with this process is that when you take a chunk out, your piece of that's missing, so let's say I just take a little bit here. I only want to do this little bit of line that's missing here. The thing that's interesting there is really you see the start point and you see the finishing goal point. You're making a bridge between those two things. That's all you're doing. You're not attempting to do the whole drawing. You're only concentrating on one small aspect of it. So I can do that. I can make that. And I can see that his line blown up on the computer and printed is kind of a nice little messy line. I can do that messy little line. Making it a bit thick. There it is. And then the next time I take out this bit and fill in that bit. And the next time I take out this bit. So you just keep taking these little pie shapes out, no more than you're comfortable with, and filling in the gap between. These are curves, so they're not horizontal and vertical. You have to acknowledge the fact that that's another step up in difficulty, but it's pretty obvious where that goes. And again, I'm turning you into a photocopier. This isn't you making up something or you drawing a bird, that you have a photograph of from scratch. This is something that I want you to be absolutely accurate, to hone that skill of paying attention, of slowly working, of making your eye, your mind, and your hand coordinated. Okay, so I poddled along with this drawing and ended up here. It's no great drawing, it's just adequate. I was doing it quickly, and there we have a little bit of Leonardo da Vinci. I'm going to show you another Leonardo da Vinci one, which is kind of more fun. Here. So I particularly adore this drawing. I just think that face is just so amazingly significant and looks out at us from the 1400s. A woman looking at the artist. It's a linear drawing. It has a lot of little scribbly linear bits. You can see here, Leonardo couldn't make up his mind where the neck was. He couldn't make up his mind quite where the nose edge was. This is a master, and he's fussing around with things like that. That's okay. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. It's somewhere in there, and it's a sketch. But such a lovely moment of drawing. This drawing is complicated for you if you decided to do it because it has this cross-hatching again that Leonardo did. We are told that his cross-hatching goes in this direction because he was left-handed. I kind of debate that, but that's my own personal view. Anyway, the idea of the cross-hatching could be something that you play around with, that you just take a little section here and you try to accurately do those cross-hatches, or you could ignore that completely and just go to Leonardo's outlines. And that's what I've done here. I've just gone to the outlines and drawn little bits of that. And that's the kind of drawing I think it would be interesting for you to try, that you just do little kind of tiny bits that are fairly easy bridges between that line coming down and then continuing here. It's the back of a hat that she's wearing. Doing 2 or 3 little lines emerging from the side of the nose like Leonardo did because he couldn't make up his mind where it was. And then finally I did one, again, I'm not radically pleased with this, but it's kind of okay-ish. That is a further take on what the mouth looks like and so on and so forth. So we have a little bit more of a view of her there. And one thing it certainly made me aware of is how tender his drawing of the eye is, and how I wasn't there yet. My eye is harsher than that. And it gives me an insight into his skill set and the skill sets that I might want to work on. And analyzing it in that way for feeling and for intention and for Leonardo's mistakes. And it takes me into the zone of the actual making of it, so that if I ever saw this in a museum, I would have a different connection with this. Art will mean something different to you when you have drawn. And art will mean, a face will mean something different to you. If you're on public transport, you will look at people differently if you draw, because you'll think, oh, that's a really interesting nose. I'd really like to put a line on the edge of that nose. Or, her hair is amazing. I would have to spend a month doing that hair by hair by hair, if I were drawing her. So let's stop there, and now we're going to go for the big one. We're going to go for a face, and we're going to leave line as part of what we do, but we're going to move to tone. And you'll find that difficult at first, and then you'll find it very easy in the end. We're going to embark on something that you'll find a bit scary at first, but it isn't really. You can do this slowly, and you can start again, and you can screw it all up and throw it away if you don't like it. So everybody begins drawing somewhere. And this method of drawing I worked on with 4th graders. And they were little heroes, I can tell you. It was amazing. Every child, and that would be about 100 of them, produced an absolutely wonderful drawing. And they all were quite distinctive, but they all looked like the photograph from which they worked. And each child had a different style. Each child bore down on the pencil in a different way or handled it very lightly. This drawing is a drawing from a photograph of Fazal Sheikh, and it is of an Afghan child, and it's just exquisite. It's caught the sweet sadness in her face. It comes from Fazal's photograph here, which I've reproduced for you. We can see the photographer in the child's eyes as a kind of silhouette. It's a stunning photograph, and he gave me permission to use his photographs in these classes, and I sent him images of some of the ones that the kids did. So that shows you that a fourth grader achieved that. It means that you can too. It also shows you that this is a paper bag kind of paper behind. It's what we call in the art world a mid-tone paper. And that has a very special effect on your drawings. It gives you a kind of skin tone that's laid in. That means that you do darks, and you have the opportunity at the end of then putting in highlights in the eyes or highlights on the edge of a dress. I would say at this point, don't overdo the highlights because you want to keep it really subtle, but it really does bring the drawing into a couple of different dimensions, which is extremely pleasing to the eye. So you have the highlights to look forward to. That's what many artists wait for all the way through their painting, to put the highlights in last. And our drawing opportunity does have that. That's not to say you have to work on mid-tone paper. If you prefer to work on another tone of paper, that's fine. So looking at our materials, they're the same: pencil, eraser, sharpeners, scissors, and then we're bringing in the paper bag. And the paper bag is a recycle process, which I've done on the drawings that we'll be working on today. And all I do is I cut out the place where the paper is not too much with a seam or a bend on it, and then I iron it just with an iron. My mother always used to iron all the Christmas paper and use it again the next year, so I uphold that sort of abstemious, nice treatment of paper. I think it's good to recycle, and I think recycling a paper bag is really great, and it's a beautiful surface to draw on. It has a kind of tooth on it that grabs the pencil graphite and makes a very nice impression when you're working on it. The first thing you'll want to do is decide who you're going to draw. If you're going to draw yourself, which is a great thing to do because you know your face very, very well, it doesn't matter if it goes slightly wrong. Don't worry about it. It's only you that is going to worry. What you will do is take a selfie of yourself, and then you will change it into black and white on the computer, or have somebody help you do that. And if possible, blow it up to about 8 inches, top of the head to the chin, so that you have a life-size head that you're actually working on, and that you can print on a piece of paper that's just an ordinary printing paper, so that it's not too thick a paper because you're going to be cutting it, and you want to have the kind of flexibility of that paper rather than card. I've printed on card because I wanted you to see the quality of photographs that have come offline. So, that's heavy card, and that's kind of hard to cut when you're actually doing the drawing. You might want to find a photograph of someone that is in the entertainment world, Louise Brooks, or somebody that has a striking kind of black and white image. I very much like the flapper era because I think it's sort of very distinctive on the face. You could take a photograph of a grandmother or somebody who had a headshot taken during their lifetime. It's probably pretty difficult to take a snapshot that has a head this big and blow it up to life size. You'll make a lot of work for yourself. You need a good headshot that will take the enlargement to a more life size head. I particularly am interested in Mata Hari. I've done a lot of drawings of her and a lot of artwork. Drawing all of this might scare you to begin with, but actually it isn't that difficult. You'll be doing little black lines under all those pearls, and it goes pretty fast, actually. Doing something as dramatic as this is pretty fabulous to have the outcome of that. But go online and have a look, and turn whatever you see toward black and white photographs. It'll make it easier for you. Here are another couple of shots from Fazil Sheikh's work. I chose these because they eliminate the hair. And I'll just make mention here, and I'd like you to remember this, that you may spend an hour or perhaps 2 hours, maybe more, working on the face, but you should spend at least as much time working on the hair. Don't assume that because hair looks like a pencil line that you just go chink, 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 and there's your hair. Take time to get all the different directions that are expressed in the hair. it sets the whole face off and makes the whole portrait really feel like it's realistic. So the hair is very important. Here I'm eliminating it just for the facility of the time of showing you how to do this drawing. So let's start where we can, and looking at Fazl's drawing here, I've marked out ahead of time the places that I want to cut. Simply, again, to save time because of filming. Normally I would just cut away and do what I wanted to do on it, but I wanted to share that with you. We will skip, because you don't want to be sitting here watching me draw for the time that it would take me to do this. So there will be gaps, but I'll try to hit the points that will actually support your drawing. Main point is to say we're moving from line, which we explored a little bit, and we're moving into tone. What does that mean? It means that this is not a linear drawing. This is a drawing that has blobs of gray and blobs of black and all of that. Principally, you will be drawing the blacks, but the black that you will be drawing, instead of it just being a line around an eye, is probably going to be a line with a soft edge, or it will be a blob of an eyeball. And so you're going to have to look at the shapes and the negative spaces on the piece. You're going to cheat as much as you like, and you're going to be putting a hole in the corner of an eye and the outer corner. Let's lift that up so you can see it. I put a hole right there in the corner of the eye. Then I know where I start the eye lines or the eye shapes. And those support points are going to be very important to you. You can either do those all at once at the beginning, saying, okay, I need corner of eye, I need edge of eyebrow, I need the bottom bit of the nostril, I need the center of the nose, I need the peak on the top of the lip, I need the outermost edge of the darkest dark here. And what I'd like you to do is to say there is only the darkest dark, and then maybe a gray that's in between, in case you want to sort of softly shade the edge of the face. That will be lightly touching the paper with the pencil, whereas when I do the eye, I'm going to be really, really trying to make that as dark as this pencil will go. As I mentioned earlier, this is a 3B Derwent pencil. This is the one I love the most. There are a great variety of pencils. You may find that you really like contrast. If you do, then you may want to go to 4B or 5B pencils. If you don't like that darkness, you may want to go to an F pencil or something like that. Okay, so I'm going to take a chunk out of here just to show you how I would approach this. First of all, don't cut the paper underneath. That would not be helpful at all. Go straight in, and I'm going straight into the face because I want to establish where the side of the face is. So I'm going to take it right up. Some of my students, the fourth graders, developed different strategies. Some of them would cut along the edge of the face so that they knew where the face edge was. Nothing wrong with that. It's a support. You might say to yourself, okay, I'm going to do that in the first instance, but when I go to the other side of the face, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try to freehand it or look at it as a piece of symmetry. But any cheat that you develop, do it. If you invent something, you should do that and then take it away from yourself and see how you do, and then put it back if you don't do so well. Okay, so here's an abstract. It has a little bit of cheek here. It has a very soft edge. It doesn't have a sharp line, so I'm going to kind of feather that edge in. It has the darkest dark there. Then it has a little bit of trim or edge of this fabric. And then it has the actual piece of cloth that is going over her head with a little bit of fold in it. This outer edge might bother you because it's neither here nor there. It's soft. And you might just want to feather that in, meaning feather, well, lightly stroke it in. Pretend now and again that the pencil is actually touching the face of this child, because that will influence the way you do it. Your imagination will go into your hand, and your hand will feel the softness of that face. And you probably won't think any words at that time. It'll just be soft marks, as you would do if you were touching a child's face with a pencil. Okay, so let me do this, and we're going to skip about, so watch this. Soft kind of edge here, going in like that. Okay, I'm showing you this on white paper first because I want you to be able to see the lines, and it's a little less distinct on the paper bag that I intend to do this on. So here for the first start here, I'm going to show you a demo on white paper, which is perfectly acceptable paper to work on, but I eventually want you to be working on this brown paper. So I'm going to be filling this in solidly. I would take several minutes to do this more solidly than I'm showing you here. But this gives you an idea of the soft edge here, feathering that in. Oops, coming down to here. How does it go? Well, that's there. This goes out there. Okay, so soft edge, you can see how I'm making a bridge to the edge here. It's actually a bit higher up. And there's a fold that comes up here. So that's basically what we'll be doing on brown paper, and the brown paper has a little less of a contrast, so I just want to be very clear about making a bridge, filling in, side of face, feathering it in. Okay, now I'm going to switch this to a brown paper bag. Okay, so taping it on the brown paper. And I like to establish the edge, so I just use this paper as a ruler, just run the pencil along there. Another thing that you can do with your spare piece of paper is that if you are uncertain where something is and you want to measure it, you want to say how far is the edge of the eye from here to there, you can make little measure marks like that and use the paper as a measuring device. Again, it's a crutch. It's good. You will eventually be able to do that with your eye without any support, but that's another way of kind of supporting anything you're uncertain about. Okay, so here is the piece. It's a little abstract, and we know that this line is making, hey, what kind of triangle is that? Bird beak. A bird beak triangle coming down, touching the outer line there. And we're going to come along the inner edge of this piece of cloth that is over her head. And there is a double line there. It has a thickness, that fabric. And the side of her face is a soft line. It's not distinctive. It's not a hard line. Little shadow going into her cheek. I'm imagining that I'm touching her cheek softly with the pencil, and that brings me to kind of understand her. There's another point of drawing a face that occurred to me. This process I invented in my car on the way to the lesson I was about to teach, because I was bored of the way I was actually teaching the drawing, and I wanted to try something new. And it suddenly occurred to me, wait, if I took a chunk out of a drawing and you just drew that little bit in the chunk, rather than trying to attempt the whole face at once, what would happen? Could you do that? I didn't know if it would work. And I was about to start the drawing class for over 100 kids, really. And it was a leap of faith, but it paid off, and all of them really managed really well with it. So the idea here of simplifying the drawing process, of making it a small problem, just a bit at a time, means that you can actually draw anything. It doesn't have to be a face if you're scared of a face. We know faces so well that actually drawing a face is kind of easier than you think it is. But you could draw a flower this way, or you could draw a bird this way. You just keep taking those little chunks, those little pie shapes, out of the original drawing that's on the top, a photograph that's on the top, and you just plod away at doing little bits and pieces. Okay, so here we know that this fold comes up here, nearly to the top, and we would have shadow behind that. You're just stroking this in. So going back to the feeling of touching the cheek, by the time you finish this drawing, you know this face. This face is something that if you saw this child, you would recognize her. She has become in your brain a friend. That's what we do with friends. We recognize their faces. They're familiar to us. We care for them. And so that bond, that a way of knowing something, a way of knowing a flower, knowing an orchid, knowing a face, drawing brings you close to that. And that's why I think it's important. I mean, we insist that our children learn to read, but we allow our children to not have the same ability in their drawing. It's not considered important. And I think there is a big importance to drawing. I think it brings us closer to our world, our environment, our animals, our friends, and people that we don't know, people in other countries, people who look different than ourselves. Once we have drawn somebody who we consider to be very different from ourselves, we know something about them that we didn't know before we started the drawing, and it's really important that. It's really important in our feelings and our understanding of other human beings. And I think drawing is one of the better vehicles to do that. So let's do another chunk. We're going to keep it simple. I'm not going to do anything too challenging. I'm going back into the cheek again. And I'm going to cut to there. And again, I have the same bridge idea between this bit of the face and the bit I drew before. And we know, again, the side of her face has a little bit of soft shadowing, not too hard, just rather softly dragging the pencil over that area. And then down comes the dark up to that soft area. And here we can see that there's a curve in the garment that she's wearing here. There's a little bit of a stitch or edge coming up there. I'll just put that in lightly. And then the edge over here of that fold continues. So talk to yourself or not. Listen to a podcast while you're doing this. Filling in areas like this, you can listen to something, music that you like, or something that's distracting, that makes you not bored with just filling in black. You're pressing hard to get a black tone. All right, so let's say what we've got here. If we hold it up there, we begin to see the infill, and we begin to see the tone of the paper behind. This is white paper that's printed on. This is now going to brown and black, and the drawing begins to emerge. Okay, I'm going to go into the eye here because I think this will be the bit that worries you the most. We tend to look at people's eyes and we identify them. And really it's the most, one of the two most interesting parts of the drawing. And I've already poked one hole in the corner here. Let's mark that. Now I'm going to decide another point, how far out. I'm going to put it right to the edge of the shadow above a little bit of white that's appearing there. Make a hole there and mark that. Make sure it didn't mark. Make sure it marks, because it's really discouraging that if you go to the trouble of doing that and the paper is underneath it. Okay, so now I have the one end and the other end. I could make other marks here, but I don't want to destroy the photograph, so I'm going to just hope that I do it well. And cut up there. I'm cutting along the edge of her eyebrow there, which is a little dangerous because I could miss that out. And I usually, the younger children often started with the eyes, which was perilous, but they just jumped in, and for the most part they did a really great job, even though they were starting with a hard thing first. Okay, so the eye itself is a rainbow kind of arc, not that kind of rainbow, but a soft arc. Think about that for a minute, how that arc goes. And you've got your 2 points. Not sure you can see them on the camera. There and there. So we know where we're starting, we know where we're finishing. And that's the darkness on the inside of the eye. One thing that is mentioned in one of the drawing books that a lot of people have a high regard for, and is a good other backup technique if you are interested. The Betty Edwards book, Drawing on the Right Side, is a super book. And she points out that, remember, eyelids are thick. Also, remember right underneath the eye here that how thick that is just above the eyelashes there. And don't make it too thin. It's not just a kind of layer of skin, it's kind of thick. So let's get my hand out of the way so you can see. Okay, I'm doing the arcs of the eye. What if I do it wrong? Well, the eye might have been like that. You have an excuse. And if you're doing a self-portrait, you're kind of going to know your face pretty well. So you have a leg up if you're doing a self-portrait. Now, look at the negative space of the eye. Look, she has such a large pupil. But look at this little kind of arc shape there. What is it? Oh, TP with a kind of arc at the bottom, or a fingernail or something. Turn it into something in your mind's eye. Look at the slight shading where the corner of the eye is, and then try to get that arc right. Usually the top of the eye is cut off. A lot of people, when they first draw an eye, put a ball in the middle, a complete ball. We very seldom see that in an eye, only when somebody's really frightened. So know that the top and bottom of the pupil are likely to be cut off. Study that. Look at people. Notice how the eyeball is either cut off or not. Notice people's noses. Notice their eyelashes. And this is the beauty point too, is the highlight. Don't make it too small. You're going to come back to that highlight later on with a white pencil. Give yourself a little ample space for that highlight when you start blacking in the eye. Okay, we're going to black that in. And something a little different somewhere in here in this eye. Goes on a little bit there. Okay, and soft shadows underneath are partly eyelashes, but also don't forget you're going to leave this as paper. That's the kind of thick lid at the bottom. You're going to want to leave some paper there, even though it's kind of shadowy above it. And we want to put those little eyelash marks in. They go in different directions. Notice that, because if you just go along the bottom there and go, all these little hairs in one direction, and if you do it all the same length like I just did, they look terrible. So we're going to come back in on that in a minute. Okay, upper lid. Remember, we have a nice bit of paper going through here. And then the dark above that, which shows you where the eyelid is. And nobody will be over your shoulder filming you when you're doing this, so you will be much more concentrated than I am, nor will you be talking to anybody as I am doing. So I hope that'll help you. Okay, so fair to middling eye, a little bit of shadow work needs to go in there, but that is establishing the beginning of the eye, and I would, go back in on this for quite some while, doing little bits of shadow, thickening up this bit here. Look how thick that darkness is. Getting the black in the eyeball, getting that right. Fair amount of work yet to be done on that eye, but at least it's placed, and I would go back in with my favorite little tool here and get a few little subtleties worked out that, drawing at an angle here is not helping me. The other thing you should notice is that usually I draw at an angle, I don't draw flat. So, working on a board that's slightly tilted, you have your work kind of facing you in a different way. That's really fairly helpful. If you don't have that facility, don't worry about it. You can just get over it. I'm staying back because of the camera, so that presents me with some challenges. But there it is. Okay, I'm drawing eyebrows, and you know about eyebrows. I'm sure you look at people's eyebrows in your own. Yes, you can do little strokes. Each stroke of the pencil is an eyebrow mark. I know, that the eyebrow has come up right to that cut. And look how far down I am. I need to be up there with that eyebrow. There. So let's take a little bit of that out. That's a bit too low. Get her eyebrow thing back in. Closer. We need to be closer. Anyway, something like that. The other thing you can do is turn the work upside down every now and again, just to get a good look at something, because it becomes more abstract and you see the mistakes you've made. Again, ask somebody, spot the difference, please. My daughter, my child. Oh, Mom, your eye has too much white. Oh no, look, that's different. Like there's not that much white there. Make that blacker. You don't have to have necessarily a professional artist at your shoulder in order to do this. I'm going to show you another trick here and jump forward. I would be cutting lots of little bits here, but I don't want to take that time on the film. You would do it in the same way that you did the bird. Here I'm going to go right up the middle of the face, and this is you on your second or fourth drawing, something like that, that you could progress yourself if you get pretty good at this when you're doing little tiny bits. By the second, third, fourth drawing, you might want to just cut the whole head right in half, right straight down, because like the butterfly, you do have this side to kind of model it on. You know where this mouth takes off. You know that it goes up here to there to be a symmetrical mouth. I can put in the outer limit of the shadow like that, so I know where I'm heading, if I made that mark correctly. So I know I'm heading to there with a kind of soft shadowy edge. Okay, so you can do that later on, where you take it and you then use one side to model the other. If the shadow work is different, yes, you have to pay attention to the piece that you cut out and make the shadow different. But that symmetry of the face does allow you to do that kind of half when you go down this process with a little bit of practice. And so what I'm saying to you is that the process, you can take baby steps at first, taking the tiniest little chunk out, just filling it in, 5 minutes, and something you have to do suddenly takes you away from the drawing. Then you come back and do another 5 minutes. As you graduate through this process, you can cut the whole drawing in half and do the other side of the face, putting some points in if you need that support, putting some measurements in if you want to see how far the side of the face is from here on the photograph, and then mark it on here. So it isn't just that you will always be taking little tiny snippets. You can graduate through this to the objective, which is to be looking at this, and you're able to draw it. You put in some lines that show you where the line of the eyes are, the line of the mouth, etc., etc. So it's not that you're a slave to the process. Eventually, as you get better, as you practice this, then you make it your own, and you know when you can move yourself on. Now you can draw the daisy and the rose without any support whatsoever. The little differences in that daisy petal, maybe the petal was like that. It's not so significant. Of course, on a face, we do know that we know faces so well. We have so much information here that we know that, if you put a nostril in a certain position, it doesn't look right relative to the other nostril. But you'll see those things as you're drawing. So I'm putting in the highlights in the eye with a white pencil. This is a really exciting part of the drawing. Yes, I could put in the whites of the eye, but I'm not going to overdo it at this stage. I just want to actually, touch in a few things just to kind of help the camera be able to see this as it develops. Okay, and now we're going to skip forward a little bit. I'm going to take off a big piece, and I've drawn this next bit. So you'll see a reveal there of drawing symmetrically, again, to save your time and just to jump forward. So there we have another bit of the drawing done. And as we go forward, if we were doing a kind of fast forward, we would cut off piece after piece here that would reveal drawing that would take me 5-10 minutes to do. But piece by piece, it isn't so difficult to kind of get those pieces going. Then I might be really adventurous and take a whole quarter of the drawing off, or I might not do that. I might go below the nose and just do the other side of the mouth. Having established one part of the mouth, then the other part isn't so difficult. But don't speed up. Keep it slow. Make sure that the work that you do is slow. If you find yourself anxious to stop, to finish it, stop yourself and go have a cup of tea, because it's slow wins this race, and slow makes a great drawing. If you start speeding it up, you're thinking about finishing, not about the actual person that you're drawing or the thing that you're trying to accomplish. So that's kind of where we've got to. There's more to accomplish here. It's not a race to the end, but a race to kind of see how good you can do with a piece of artwork like this. Let's take this piece away now and leave a little corner up here. We're just about there. A little bit more to do here in the top corner. But there she is with her highlights coming in. As I say, I could put white of the eye in there, and then again, maybe not. Maybe I'll leave it soft. Do I mind these folds? No, I don't. I quite like them. I think it adds to the character of the drawing. We have her skin tone established. We could dust in more little shadows and things like that, but it's pretty much there. We've done most of the darks, and that's that drawing kind of ready for the last little interlude up there. Okay, now we're going to move to doing the drawing of the full face. And from a slightly different perspective than the line drawing, we're going to be looking at shade and tone. I've chosen the face of a woman called Mary Seacole. Mary was a nurse during the Crimean War. She was Jamaican, Scottish. Her father was a Scots military man. Her mother was a Jamaican woman who was a healer and a midwife. And Mary grew up in this atmosphere. She was a free woman at the time. There was slavery at the time. She went to the Crimean War. And actually, first she applied to the War Office to see if she could go officially to the war to help wounded soldiers. They turned her down, so she took her own money and built a hotel near the battlefront, and she cared for officers and servicemen that were wounded in the war. She also was at the heart of other kinds of medical emergencies around the world, treating cholera and all sorts of different things that were using her healer processes, herbal remedies. remedies, and she was big on hygiene. So at the same time as Florence Nightingale was operating, this woman was also establishing care for injured people and in places where there were terrible conditions. So as a nurse, she could be called maybe the first nurse practitioner. She was untrained. She was certainly considered very highly by the people that she treated, and I think it's a very beautiful face. It would be a face of kindness that you would wish to see if you needed help, I think. So we're going to take different sections of this face, and we're going to be removing that and then drawing the bits that we've taken out. So here we go. And there. So I've cut into the face so that I can establish the edge of the face here. And I have a little bit of hair there that is mostly dark. So I can establish the side of the face, and then I can see that that dark comes up a bit and then it curves around to meet that area over there. And this I will just fill in with darkness. I won't take all your time here waiting to make that as dark as I eventually will make it, but you can see what the purpose is here. I'll also establish the edge of the work by putting a line right down here, so we get an edge there. And oops, where did my piece go? Oh well, it's not there. So this I would spend some time normally filling in. I won't do that right now. I will take another piece and I would come back to that and do that later as a darker part. Let's jump down here and skip a bit so that you can see the process. I'm taking a pie-shaped piece out. If this was an abstract painting, it'd be quite nice. There's a lot of tones in there that are interesting. Actually, it is the edge of her collar on her garment, and I have just a little bit of face there. That establishes the edge of the face, and I would do that dark up to the edge. I've taken this piece right to the direction change there of the collar. So the next piece I take out, I will be doing not quite a horizontal line, but a line that takes the top of the collar and the cheek together. So let's take that piece next. So these are not big tasks. If I got the cheek in slightly the wrong place, well, she might have been a bit thinner. It wouldn't be the end of the world as far as the portrait is concerned, so you can forgive yourself if it's a little inaccurate. Now we're going to turn that corner, and we're not going to go horizontal with the bottom of the paper. We're going to turn a corner and go at a slight upward angle there to take that collar behind her cheek. And again, were I drawing this not in front of a camera and in my own time, I'd be working more slowly, more carefully. I would be filling that black in even blacker than it is there. But for the purposes of our thing, I want to be as fast as possible. This comes down and does a nice little curve there, and then that would be all black again. Side of the face has a little bit of a dusting there of lightly touched pencil. Think of the pencil as touching her cheek, her actual cheek, that you're actually making this pencil touch flesh, and you will draw differently thinking that. It's a sort of thing like sympathetic magic. Okay, so we've established the side of the face there, and over a period of time what I would be doing is adding bits. I would be putting a hole in the corner of the eye, and I would drill down there and make sure it's there. It's not. Drill down again. It is. Then I would find the edge of the shadow here. Actually, my pencil needs sharpening, and that's why it didn't mark, I think. Okay, go to the edge of that shadow. There, I think, is going to be my point. It does have shadow beyond it, but I will note that as I draw. And this is quite a hard eye to do. She has skin going over the top of the eyelid, and you'll want to leave paper where it is lightest. You're going to be leaving paper. Let's do this. Where is the top of that line? Go there. Okay, I've cut right through her eyebrow, which isn't very nice, but there. Okay, so we can see that her eye drops down. This line is kind of at an angle that way. This is my model. I'm just going to start in that corner with those dark marks there. I don't have to draw it in any position. If I wanted to do it upside down, it would become more abstract. I wouldn't, have it be any less real for doing that, because I'm just looking at shapes and lines and edges. Okay. Note that if this was a line, it'd be a really thick line there. Note how thick that is, going up over the top. And now we put in that thickness. And think about that whiteness there. That's really important to keep. And see this little leak of light in there. That's important to keep too. All of this we would probably go over and make darker and darker until we were satisfied with it. Ball of the eye coming down here with a little white to the side. Keep an eye on that highlight. That's really important in the eye, because we probably will put that in with white pencil at the very end. See that little scoop under there? Get that in there. Okay, and this is pretty straight, that line underneath the ball of the eye. There is the highlight there. The rest of it is really nice and dark. Eyes, probably the hardest part, and the mouth. The expression in the mouth, though, is really important, and the tiniest thing can make a difference to how that expression works or doesn't work. Okay, I would spend a long time here, and you will get very bored if I do that. So I'm going to skip forward and say there's a lot of little delicate mark making to go on here. Just touching around her eye. Imagine that the pencil is touching her skin. Imagine where those darknesses are and how it comes up into this eyebrow. The eyebrow is going to continue when we take that piece out there. And the eyebrow really sets off that light bit above the eye. And we have shadow coming in here too, all the way down there, light shadow. And this will have to get darker, all of this area here, to the place where I put that hole. So kind of there, not there yet, but you know what I'm doing here, and touching it in, shadow, lightly, all of that. We're going to fast forward now and look at this in a more developed state. So, okay, so we've spent a little time on this in the absence of the camera. We've darkened this a little bit, got a little bit further on. I'm going to take a big chunk out here now. I wouldn't do this all at once in your early stages, but I'm going right up the middle of the mouth, sort of. Hello, hello, hello. Up the nose. And removing that, I have more drawing that I've already put in there, and you can see how the drawing has, come round this side because I've taken this piece, and this piece out, and her face begins to emerge. Yes, I put a dot there to decide where that edge of the nostril comes. I put a dot here to decide where the edge of the mouth comes there. And I've darkened this area here quite substantially. So would I put a dot in through here? Maybe, maybe not. I probably would put one there or at the top of this shadow here so that I knew kind of where I was heading for. Each of those stages, I'm taking only a little bit. I might feel tired. And so I might say, okay, I'm just going to do something kind of easy here. I don't want to spend a lot of time fiddling around here. I'm going to do a very simple bit of color and whiteness. Now, when I come back in there with the white pencil, because I have saved up this sort of treat of this lovely white lace here, suddenly the drawing's going to start popping because I've got a three-tone action going on, and I would spend a fair amount of time putting this white in as the lace from the original photograph, and it might be that I'd find more little black bits to put in or gray bits, but this would really perk up the drawing to have this contrast of white lace against the kind of skin tones that we've already established going on in the face. And then too, I would also say, oh goody, I get to do this highlight. Do I dust in this light area here? Maybe, maybe not. I might put it in, have a look at it, and then take it back out again if I didn't like it. Does that bring her eye to life? Yeah, it kind of does. I don't know if you're picking up any reflection on that graphite. Sometimes you see it as silver, which can be annoying. Any other little things in this that really scream out that, hey, this should be a white on her nose? Do we put a little highlight in there? Don't go mad with the white. It's very, very tempting, but you can so quickly overdo it. Often there's a little bit of a lightness on the top of the lip line. Be cautious, do it lightly, do it so you can take it out. Often there's a little bit of a highlight here on the lip, so that you get a little bit of that coming forward. What do you think? I mean, is that too much? Is that too little? Could we stand more? Now we can reveal that we've got that far. We've done most of the face. I would spend the same amount of time on this eye. Look at those darks, look at these lines here. Get that little white in there. When I wanted to rest, I'd do a little abstract work there and try to slow myself down on the hair, because once you get to the hair, you think you're home and dry and you start rushing it. Don't spend as much time on this bit of the hair as you did on the eye, just to get those funny little shapes, because it will convince people that you really, really know what you're doing. Okay, so that really takes us through most of the things that you will meet when you're drawing. We've looked at the face, and you can go online and find very simple black and white faces that really take only the dark colors, only a kind of drawing look. If you want to start the face there rather than the tone work, those are available. You can just print them out and go through it as we did the sort of Thunder Crow that we started with. I think that the drawing exercises that we do take us closely to things that we're interested in. So it's really interesting for you to think about the things that mean something to you. Is it a bird that you particularly like? Do you like owls? Or is there a cat that somebody has in your family that you would like to do a present for them, of a drawing of their cat? Can you get a photograph that's big enough of that cat that you can blow it up to a reasonable size? Think about something that matters to you and begin to find a way to draw that. You might do an exercise of a little black and white linear cat on line first, or a favorite kind of dog. If you're going to do fur, slow down, think about the directional changes in the furs, don't rush it. What means something to you, you will invest more in the actual drawing itself. So a self-portrait is a good place to go because you know your face. Also, it's nice to kind of take a snapshot of your face through a pencil at this point in your life. If there's somebody in your life that you care for, that you are wanting to do a picture of them as a child, or as they are now, get a good photograph together and try that. The idea melts away that somebody has to have a flattering image of themselves. When you are drawing something, it's interest, it's the differences in their face, the lines in their face that become the fascination. And I think that's one of the most important parts of this process, that you might start out trying to do the drawing of a very beautiful woman in the 20s. And eventually what you're going to come to is that you want a face that has plenty of action going on in it, that it isn't just a mask, that it's a face that has lived a bit and has character in it and is different. You may want faces from foreign countries. You may want a costume, the people who wear headdresses, or things that someone wearing a hat. It'll be the differences in faces that you begin to look for and appreciate. One other point, that where you start with a flower, if the flower petal is drawn slightly incorrectly, well, actually the flower petal might have been that shape. So you have a kind of exit strategy that you don't have to be perfect with your drawings. The drawings will be interesting because of the amount of time you spend on them, and because of the care that you do the blacks with, and that you touch in those highlights. Don't worry where it deviates exactly from something. If you see the deviation, then you're learning to draw, because you're seeing that, oops, I should have made that line flatter or that area darker. That's all that artists do. They look at their drawings and see the faults, and that's where you're learning. And if you find this an interesting process, try to keep it up. Keep a journal, keep a little book, do notes. If you see an interesting leaf, spend a little time drawing it. It may build to something that's very meaningful for you, and you may want to write about it at the same time. So keeping an artist journal is a lovely thing to do. I hope that's been of some help to you, and I'm really happy to answer questions. If you see this video and you have some questions, it would be my pleasure to answer them. Thank you for the opportunity of teaching you to draw.